Hey everybody, welcome back to day 3 of the Rivals of Ixalan set review on the Mana Leek. I'm John as always, and today we're going to take a look at all of the black cards in Rivals from, of course, a limited perspective. We're talking sealed, we're talking draft, we're not talking anything else. Don't at me. What I do want you to do, of course, is chat with me, chat amongst yourself in the comments about all of these cards. What grades do you agree with? What grades do you disagree with? What cards are you excited about? Let me know down below. But up first, we're going to start with Arterial Flow. Arterial Flow is 1 black for a sorcery at uncommon. Each opponent discards 2 cards. If you control a vampire, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So it's a harder to cast Mind Rot. Mind Rot is 2 and a black, discard 2 cards. And it has a 4-point life swing attached to it, which, you know, this isn't necessarily what I want to be doing in draft. Spending an entire card on a Mind Rot, even if it does drain for 2, isn't really what I'm super excited to be doing. It is potentially one of the best Mind Rots we've seen, so I think I could see it at a C-. As with basically every Mind Rot ever, it's much more playable in sealed. I actually would just flat out play this all the time in sealed, not going out of my way, and I'd cut it if I had better cards, but it's a bit more of a C in sealed where you don't have as much selection. But in draft, I've got this at a C-. It's going to be a really low pick for me, and I don't think it's going to be something that I really want to play. I'm going to keep my eye on it, of course. Attaching damage to a Mind Rot is definitely pushing Mind Rot into a playable card area. So C- to start. I will keep an eye on it. Canal Monitor is up next. Canal Monitor is 4 and a black for a creature lizard at common. It's a 5/3 and it's completely vanilla. There is no flavor text whatsoever. I do not want a 5/3 for 5 ever. Ever. Just ever. I'll play this only when I've basically given up on having another playable card. It's too expensive, it's too low toughness, it dies to things that cost significantly less than 5 mana. It's got no abilities on it. It's a D-. It's basically unplayable. Champion of Dusk is up next. Champion of Dusk is 3 black for a creature vampire knight at rare. It's a 4/4. When Champion of Dusk enters the battlefield, you draw X cards and you lose X life, where X is the number of vampires you control. A 5 mana 4/4 is a little bit overcosted, but the ability could be good depending on how many vampires you've got. Really, if you have even 1 or 2, this becomes pretty darn fine, I would say. The only real problem is if you're low on life, I suppose, and you have too many vampires, and you may just end up killing yourself. But otherwise, this card just seems pretty decent. I don't think that one scenario is going to be that huge of a problem. The second worst case is you have no vampires down, and you get a 5/5, or you get a 4/4 for 5. It's not the end of the world. It is not a stellar play, but it's not the end of the world. This just seems like a solid build around, and you know, if you do go deep into vampires, which I hope you do after picking this pretty early, it's just going to be real good. I've got it at like an A-. I think it is a very powerful ability. It's a decent sized body. It does require a build around to an extent. That extent, of course, being drafting Ixalan the way it's supposed to be drafted, so it's not that hard. So I'm at an A- on Champion of Dusk. I don't think it is a slam down, oops, I've one bomb, but you're going to be well on your way when you do pop that down. Up next is Dark Inquiry. Dark Inquiry is 2 and a black for a sorcery at common. Target opponent reveals his or her hand. You choose a non-land card from it. That player discards that card. It's Thoughtseize at 3 mana with no life loss, which is not that good. Thoughtseize, despite the price tag, despite everything, is not that great in limited. It's obviously fantastic in constructed, but in limited, this ability just goes down because the value of cards that you're getting off of it on average is super low. That being said, if there's a threat that you literally can't deal with, I'm talking a flyer that is like a 6/6 and you have 0 ways of removing it in your entire deck, you have no flyers to block it, you have no way of dealing with it, then you can maybe side in Dark Inquiry. The trick with this, and I've talked about this a few times in previous set reviews, is you need to play it at the correct point. You don't fire this off on turn 3. You don't draw it and go, I've got 3 mana, I've got nothing else to do, let's Dark Inquiry. No. If you're afraid of a 6-drop, you wait until turn 5, or whenever it is that they have 5 lands available, and then you cast it. You give them as many possible chances to draw that card that you want to hit, and then you play this card. But you don't play this card main deck. D+, don't main deck it. Up next is a whole bunch of text on Dead Man's Chest. Dead Man's Chest is 1 and a black for an enchantment aura at rare. Enchant creature an opponent controls. When enchanted creature dies, exile cards equal to its power from the top of its owner's library. You may cast non-land cards from among them for as long as they remain exiled, which is probably going to be forever. And you may spend mana as though it were mana of any type to cast those spells. This feels real janky. I'll have to see it played to really tell, but the fact that this might just literally do nothing, you cast it, the creature never dies. Good job. You got one more permanent towards Ascend. That puts me pretty out on this. If I know I'm going to have a lot of removal spells and that creature is going to die preferably soon, then it might become more playable, but this feels like one of those cards that you pick late in pack 1 or pack 2, late in the format when you're trying to have fun. Realistically, I think this is probably just in the D range and just isn't playable in any competitive sense. You want to have some fun? Give it a go, but otherwise you should avoid it. Dinosaur Hunter is up next. Dinosaur Hunter is 1 and a black for a creature human pirate at common. It's a 2/2. Whenever Dinosaur Hunter deals damage to a, surprise, dinosaur, destroy that creature. A bear makes this always playable enough, although the idea of a 2/2 for 2 vanilla is really going out the door with this set. Yeah, it's got a really nice upside on it against dinosaurs when you're there. So it's an easy C. It's not a sideboard card. You'll play it regardless because it's 2/2 for 2. And when you do get matched up against dinosaurs, well, it's a fair bit better than that. So C for Dinosaur Hunter. You don't go out of your way to play it. If you have it, you put it in, and when you get up against those dinosaur decks, you feel real good. Up next is Dire Fleet Poisoner. Dire Fleet Poisoner is 1 and a black for a creature human pirate at rare. She's a 2/2. She has flash. She has Death Touch. When Dire Fleet Poisoner enters the battlefield, target attacking pirate you control gets +1/+1 and gains Death Touch until end of turn. This is just all around solid. It's an all around good utility creature. It's literally just better than Ambush Viper because it's a 2/2 for the exact same cost. And if you're not in need of an Ambush Viper to flash in to block and kill something, then you can just drop her surprise in combat when you're attacking and give your pirate a buff to up your clock by a point of damage, or kill a blocker that was going to trade otherwise or something. All around good. First pick behind removal, of course. It's not a bomb. It's not going to just win you the game, but the utility, the value is very much there. So I've got Dire Fleet Poisoner at a solid B. Up next is Dusk Charger. Dusk Charger is 3 and a black for a creature horse at common. It's a 3/3. It has Ascend. Dusk Charger gets +2/+2 as long as you have the City's Blessing. 3/3 for 4 is under rate. Hopefully you are not too far off from that blessing, at which point this becomes extremely okay, I guess. A vanilla 5/5 isn't quite doing much unless you got it online on turn 5, which is like the next turn if you play this on curve. So really this is around like a C-. You're just not going to play this card. It's not going to be what you want it to be soon enough, and what it is before the blessing is overcosted and understated. So C- for Dusk Charger. Up next is Dusk Legion Zealot. Dusk Legion Zealot is 1 and a black for a creature vampire soldier at common. It's a 1/1. When Dusk Legion Zealot enters the battlefield, you draw a card and you lose a life. It's Elvish Visionary, basically. You have to lose a life, so it's not exactly Elvish Visionary, but it's pretty darn close. Elvish Visionary is always fine and playable, even if it does cost you that life. It's a late pick, probably like just one of the last playables in your colors in the pack, so it's like a late mid-pack pick, but you'll play at least a couple of these without being upset. It's a fine C+. Dusk Legion Zealot's really going to help out the black decks across the board. If you're controlling, it's going to draw you into your removal, your counter spells, your game enders, whatever. If you're aggro, it's going to keep your hand full of stuff. It's all around fine. C+. Fathom Fleet Border is up next. Fathom Fleet Border is 2 and a black for a creature orc pirate at common. It's a 3/3. When Fathom Fleet Border enters the battlefield, you lose 2 life unless you control another pirate. A 3/3 for 3 that makes me lose 2? I'd play that if I was aggro enough. If I was really looking to fill my curve with a creature, I'd play that. The fact that sometimes, hopefully, in a pirate deck, it's not going to cost me 2 life and it's just a 3/3 for 3, that's totally fine. It was a C before that, and it's still just a C after it, but it's like a higher C. Up next is Forerunner of the Coalition. Forerunner of the Coalition is 2 and a black for a creature, human pirate at uncommon. She's a 2/2. When Forerunner of the Coalition enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a pirate card, reveal it, then shuffle your library and put that card on top, just like the previous Forerunners. Whenever another pirate enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses 1 life. Like the Vampire Forerunner, I think this is obviously entirely dependent on how deep into pirates you are. You need a bunch of pirates and preferably good pirates. If you're tutoring up a 1/1, it's not worth it. But I mean, it doesn't take too much for you to tutor up for it to be decent. This ability, I think, is fractionally better with your opponent losing a life for sure than the Vampire one. I still think I'm going to keep it at a C+, though. I don't think it's quite powerful enough to go up to a B-, but I think once you're going down that pirate route, you pick this up and you feel pretty happy with it. C+ for Forerunner of the Coalition. Up next is Golden Demise. Golden Demise is 1 black for a sorcery at uncommon. It has Ascend. All creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. If you have the city's blessing, instead, only creatures your opponents control get -2/-2 until end of turn. It's this block's Bile Blight. We've seen a version of this basically every single block since Bile Blight. I'm sure there was one before Bile Blight, but that's the first one that I really remember. Play around it, sandbag your creatures, make your opponent overextend, and then boom, get them. And you'll get some real good value out of this. Cutting the downside of being less good after drawing it while you've been establishing your board is nice if you do have the blessing, in that you'll hopefully get to ascend by playing it or already have. And then you get to probably not wrath your opponent's board. At that point in the game, they're probably going to have things that are bigger than X2s, but hopefully killing a few of their things while keeping every single thing of yours alive is going to be decent. Remember, side this out if you see nothing but X3s and above. But all in all, I'm pretty okay with this card. I think it's kind of like an early mid-pack pick, a high mid-pack pick, I think. So like a B- is where I'm going to start on Golden Demise. Grasping Scoundrel is up next. Grasping Scoundrel is a single black mana for a 1/1 creature human pirate at common. Grasping Scoundrel gets +1/+0 as long as it's attacking. I like 2/1s for 1 in white. Black isn't usually quite as built towards the white weenie way, but it can often be quite aggressive, and a 2/1 for 1 definitely fits in there. It does lose some mild value in the late game where it can't trade on defense against an X2 like a real 2/1 can, because this is just a 1/1 on the block, but it still chump blocks. Which is frequently a 2/1's job in the late game anyways. They're not often trading with things. Seems fine. I'll play this at around a C unless I'm full out aggro where it bumps up to like a bit of a C+, but it is a very mid-pack pick at absolute best. So C for Grasping Scoundrel. Gruesome Fate is up next. Gruesome Fate is 2 and a black for a sorcery at common. Each opponent loses 1 life for each creature you control. Yes, I will die to this, and no, I don't think you should play it. If you get to a point where this thing represents 4 or 5 or 6 damage, then I feel like you're just winning anyways. There's so few cases where this does enough that I'm just never playing it. It's a straight up D for me. I'm not touching it. Up next is Impale. Impale is 2 black for a sorcery at common. Destroy target creature. This is just a worse version of a card that we'll be talking about shortly, but it's still very good. 4 mana sorcery speed removal is very good, first pickable. It's a straight up B+. The only real reason that I can't quite go into the A range is that it's not a splashable card. You're not splashing double black, and of course it's not instant speed, but you'll take this when you see it. You'll feel very happy to have at least a couple of copies of this. I would go up for 3. I would probably just play 4 as well. I don't expect to ever get 4, but I would. B+ for Impale. Up next is Mastermind's Acquisition. Mastermind's Acquisition is 2 black for a sorcery at rare. Choose 1. Search your library for a card, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library, or choose a card you own from outside the game and put it into your hand. Now, I saw people fall over themselves with excitement. You mean I can bring any card I want and just grab it and put it into my hand? No. Outside of the game in a sanctioned format means your sideboard. It does not mean whatever card you want to grab from your binder. It does just mean the cards that you have drafted or opened in your pool. So this is just Diabolic Tutor. It's Diabolic Tutor that can hit your sideboard. It's not good. Diabolic Tutor is not a card that you play. I don't care if you've got a really good bomb in your deck. The fact that you might draw it and then draw this after is just not good. I've never played Diabolic Tutor. I've never seen it correct to ever play it. The fact that I can go and get a card out of my sideboard doesn't do it for me. I've got this at a D-. I'm never touching Mastermind's Acquisition. I will pass it every single time. Up next is Mausoleum Harpy. Mausoleum Harpy is 4 and a black for a creature Harpy at uncommon. It's a 3/3. It has flying, it has ascend. Whenever another creature you control dies, if you have the city's blessing, put a +1/+1 counter on Mausoleum Harpy. It's a 3/3 flyer for 5, which is a little bit pricey, but you should be pretty close to the city's blessing by the time you cast it. So hopefully this will start getting bigger. But you know, I don't like a card where you have to hope for it to be good. It's still fine. You can play it as a 3/3 flyer for 5 and not feel the worst, but you will not feel great about it. Since it only needs a single counter to move into decent territory for me, I am fine with it at a C+. I will take it mid-pack, and I probably will always play it, but I don't think I can go any higher. Yeah, sometimes this will be like a 6/6, 7/7, whatever, and you'll just win, but I think a lot of the time it's going to be a 3/3 and feel a little bit mediocre, or a 4/4 and feel fine. So C+ for Mausoleum Harpy. Up next is Moment of Craving. Moment of Craving is 1 and a black for an instant at common. Target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. You gain 2 life. Disfigure is fine. This is basically Disfigure for 1 more mana, but you gain 2 life. That's a fine deal. This hits an okay amount of stuff that I'd happily main deck it. I would definitely side it out if I just see my opponent playing nothing but big stuff. All around, I think it's a C+, late-ish mid-pack pick. It doesn't kill everything. It's generally going to kill something, though, so you'll always play it to start. So C+ for Moment of Craving. Up next is Oathsworn Vampire. Oathsworn Vampire is 1 and a black for a creature vampire knight at uncommon. It's a 2/2. Oathsworn Vampire enters the battlefield tapped. You may cast Oathsworn Vampire from your graveyard if you gained life this turn. It's a tapped bear, which is not the best, arguably close to the worst, in fact, but one that can come back and back and back is some solid value. I'm not exactly sure where to put this. I think it's like a low C+. I think a C might even just be appropriate. Tapped 2/2 is just not where you want to be. And the fact that it can come back, but it doesn't come back at instant speed on your opponent's turn or anything, it's going to be a full turn cycle before this even becomes a blocker or attacker again. So I think I'm actually going to drop it straight down to a regular old C. Pitiless Plunderer is up next. Pitiless Plunderer is 3 and a black for a creature human pirate at uncommon. He's a 1/4. Whenever another creature you control dies, create a colorless treasure artifact token. It's a 1/4 for 4 that only makes treasures when my creatures die. I think I'm out on this. The fact that it has to be my creatures dying and not my opponent's, the fact that it's a 4-drop for a 1/4 that doesn't make treasures until that time when we have 1/4s for a 3 that guaranteed make a treasure. This has a place basically only in a controlling deck that plans to go late game and, I don't know, throw things in front of your opponent's creatures. And even there, I feel like there's just much better choices. I just don't see wanting to play this very often. I've got it at a C-, might even be a D+. If this was other creatures and not just other creatures you control, I'd be higher on it. But as is, I'm not a fan. Ravenous Chupacabra is a card that I referred to just a little bit ago. Ravenous Chupacabra is 2 black for a creature beast horror at uncommon. It's a 2/2, and when Ravenous Chupacabra enters the battlefield, destroy target creature an opponent controls. It is exactly Impale, except it's also a 2/2 creature after the Impale part of it's done. This card's simply amazing. 4 mana sorcery speed, unconditional kill spell, is 100% playable. We already talked about it. We already talked about how it's first pickable. Leaving behind a 2/2 as well, sold. There's basically no chance this isn't the single best uncommon in the entire set, and one of the better cards in the entire set. You should first pick this every single time you see it. There's so few cards, and they're all going to be sitting there in the rare slot that you would ever pick over this. It's a straight A. It's an amazing card, and you want as many of them as possible. Up next is Reaver Ambush. Reaver Ambush is 2 and a black for an instant at uncommon. Exile target creature with power 3 or less. Instant speed, little thing removal is totally fine and main deckable, and it's a high mid-pack, even early pack pick. Even the stompiest, rampiest decks are still going to have early game targets for this. Just an all-around good spell. Exile makes it nice and permanent. Instant speed is fantastic. You can get blowouts with counters and auras and etc. It's an easy B for me. I'd be happy to have Reaver Ambushes by the plenty. Up next is Recover. Recover is 2 and a black for a sorcery at common. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Draw a card. We have to go through this basically every set. I don't really like spending cards on this effect unless there's a really big upside to it. For example, in Ixalan, 2 creatures for a single mana was a big enough upside for me. And even then, I still rarely played it in Ixalan. 1 creature for 3 mana and draw a card, that's probably still just not enough for me. I just won't play this. Personally, my play style, this is at like a D+, I just won't touch it. If you do like this effect, if you do use this effect a lot more, it's maybe a little bit more of a C-, but this is just not, this isn't the all-star of this type of spell that we've seen. So C- for most, D+ for me. Sadistic Sky Marcher is up next. Sadistic Sky Marcher is 2 and a black for a creature vampire soldier at uncommon. It's a 2/2. As an additional cost to cast Sadistic Sky Marcher, reveal a vampire card from your hand or pay 1. Flying and lifelink. This is just totally fine. We don't often get 2/2 flying lifelinkers for 3. That's a very good card. If you have to play it as a 4-drop, it's still not the worst. I would still play a 4-drop 2/2 flyer that has lifelink. I think I'd play it at about the C level, but playing this for 3, this is just a solid card. I've got it at actually a B-, just because little cheap, but more than 1 power flying lifelinkers is a real game. That's going to put races way out of reach for your opponent. So I've got Sadistic Sky Marcher at a B-. I'm going to pick it relatively highly, kind of late early pack, early mid pack, and I will play it every single time I have it. Tetzimok Primal Death is up next, the next primal dinosaur. Tetzimok Primal Death is 4 black for a legendary creature elder dinosaur at rare. It's a 6/6, it has Death Touch. Pay black and reveal Tetzimok Primal Death from your hand. Put a prey counter on target creature. Activate this ability only during your turn. When Tetzimok enters the battlefield, destroy each creature your opponents control with a prey counter on it. This looks really good. 6/6 for 6, already playable to an extent. The Death Touch isn't really needed. You're not probably really looking to hold back Tetzimok. I prefer 1/1s for 1 with Death Touch, but it is a nice ability nonetheless. And there's also literally no way something called Primal Death couldn't have Death Touch. Being able to just turn after turn, reveal it, and throw a prey counter on something, and then cast it, and potentially have a board wipe is going to be absolutely fantastic. The fact that even if its snap dies, its effect still happens because it happens on ETB. It doesn't have to live for this to happen. This is a bomb, a solid bomb. It's going to be enough for a solid A for me. Pushes towards the A+ range even. In fact, you know what? It's just an A+. You're snap picking this and feeling real happy about it every single time you see it. Up next is Tomb Robber, because presumably Tomb Raider is copyrighted. Tomb Robber is 2 and a black for a creature human pirate at rare. It's a 1/1 with menace. Pay 1 generic mana and discard a card. Tomb Robber Explorers. A 1/1 menace for 3 is, of course, unplayable. Pitch a card and explore. Of course, you pay 1 mana for it. And if you get a land, are you happy? I mean, I assume you threw away a land, but I guess that thinned your deck a little bit. And if you don't, getting the Pseudo Scry and a counter gets us a 2/2 menace, at which point we're feeling okay with our 3 mana, now 4 mana, really investment. Above this, and we start to feel decent. But I feel like the investment is just way too much here. I'll certainly give it a try. I'll watch people give it a try, but I really expect it to fall in the C+ range, kind of like Deadeye Tracker did. Deadeye Tracker, yeah, you could see how it could get out of control if your opponent just did nothing for many, many, many turns, but I don't think you get that kind of chance in Limited or really in Magic ever. You have to respect your opponent. You have to assume your opponent is actively going to play the game and attempt to beat you. So I don't think this is anywhere near first pick. I think it's a pretty weak rare. I've got it at a C+. Up next is Twilight Prophet. Twilight Prophet is 2 black for a creature vampire cleric at Mythic. It's a 2/4 with flying and ascend. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you have the City's Blessing, reveal the top card of your library and put it into your hand. Each opponent loses X life, and you gain X life, where X is the card's converted mana cost. So it's a reverse Bob. You reveal the card and your opponent takes the damage. And not only that, but you gain the life that they took the damage of. Sign me up. This is just straight value town as long as you can hit 10 permanents. And again, you should be 50% of the way there when you cast this at a minimum. This is just a super solid, easy first pick. I want to go with A+ on it, but I can't quite, since you do need that blessing. Otherwise, it's not that great. And I don't think it finishes off people quite fast enough. So I'm going to go with only an A. Vampire Revenant is up next. Vampire Revenant is 3 and a black for a creature Vampire Spirit at common. It's a 3/1 flyer. It's a vampire ghost. It's not the best. It's a 3/1 flyer for 4, which is a really big investment for something that dies to literally everything. I'll cut this whenever I can. I've got it at a C-. I don't think you go out of your way to pick this. You don't go out of your way to play it. You cut it unless you just need a creature. Our second last card is Vona's Hunger. Vona's Hunger is 2 and a black for an instant at rare. It has Ascend. Each opponent sacrifices a creature. If you have the City's Blessing instead, each opponent sacrifices half the creatures he or she controls, rounded up. This card's good all around, but I think it's most commonly going to be used as a 3-mana instant speed edict, which is totally fine. I think you're going to use this card relatively early in the game to get rid of a creature and continue attacking. Getting around the usual edict problem of still being good late in the game, because when you cast it late in the game and you hopefully have the City's Blessing or get the City's Blessing by casting this, is going to be great where you get half a board wipe. Though I do feel like half of your opponent's creatures sounds a lot better in your head than it will in practice. Because it is an edict, they're still going to choose all their 1/1 vampire tokens and leave their other great creatures kicking. Still, it's an all-around solid card. It's first pickable, and it just misses out on the A range. I've got it at a B+. Our final black card is Voracious Vampire. Voracious Vampire is 2 and a black for a creature Vampire Knight at common. It's a 2/2 with Menace. When Voracious Vampire enters the battlefield, target vampire you control gets +1/+1 and gains Menace until end of turn. So a 2/2 for 3 with Menace is okay. It's not the best. I'd prefer a 3/2 with Menace. But it does make another vampire bigger and menacey for a turn. That's kind of a nice aggressive creature if you drop this on turn 3 and you hit your turn 2 vampire with it. It's not a huge drop, and it does have some dead zones, so no other vampires on the board real late in the game where a single menacey creature just isn't going to do much usually, but it does have enough good situations that I think it can be a solid C. Not quite a C+, but a solid C nonetheless. So that's going to wrap it up for the black set review. Lots of fun cards in here. I really want to play with Twilight Prophet, Tetsamok Primal Death, and just really good removal. Impale and Ravenous Chupacabra. Some really, really good stuff in here. And we all know that I'm just going to open Mastermind's Acquisition 17 times instead. Let me know what cards you're excited about, what ratings you agree with, disagree with, etc. Chat with me, chat with each other down in the comments below. Keep it respectful. And if you do have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can find me on Twitter at the Mana Leek. That's L-E-E-K, like the vegetable, not the card. You can also find me at facebook.com/themanaleek, twitch.tv/themanaleek, and patreon.com/themanaleek. If you like the content, click that thumbs up button, click subscribe if you haven't already and you want to see more. And if you do have questions, comments, or suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, see you all tomorrow.